And here we are again. Life in Stages. Welcome back, those of you who have been here before, and to any new listeners, thank you for taking the time to join us as we move into another conversation with Fiona Reid, certainly one of our country's finest, most experienced actors, great sense of humor, and a tremendous focus on work. Fiona and I met many, many years ago, but we haven't had we haven't had a chance to work together in a long time. So I'll be catching up. And Fiona, welcome.
Thank you. Very nice to be with you.
Thank you. And I want to start by, as I often do, I'm curious with the work that you've dedicated yourself to, the time that you have committed, the passion, all of those pieces. Is this something that was part of your youth and part of your childhood or family influenced?
Do you mean the work part or the theater part?
Well, I guess the theater part. I mean, did you come to this from a very early age with a sense of what it might be, whether or not you knew you wanted to perform, or did you come to this on your own at some other point?
Well, my childhood was so peripatetic in that pretty much every 3 years we moved to a different country until I was 12. So my father immigrated and we came as a family in 1964. 64. And so I was a very unrealized, I would say, pretty emotionally immature person. So I think it's fair to say that the first impulse towards theater or performing was more about showing off or wanting to be part of something, wanting to be listened to. I remember a high school teacher who said, "Oh, I'll let you do this essay and you can give it orally." I think she knew I wanted to be in front of a room. Prior to high school, all I remember was watching the panto at about age 5 in England. And when they called all the children up, I didn't go up, but I dearly wanted to go up. So I remembered that sense of longing. But once I got to high school, I was not successful. There was an actress in my class who also became a professional actor. And I thought of her as a real actress because she wasn't loud. She was very quiet. And I was more coming from the wanting to be noticed school of burgeoning student. And when I tried out for the drama class, I didn't, for the drama production, I didn't make it. We didn't have a drama program in those days. They weren't as frequent as they are now. So I went off to university really as a, with aspirations, but not thinking it was a realistic goal. Yeah. And then things sort of changed once I got to university.
So I want to go back a little bit and then we'll find you in university. You mentioned that you and your family, you moved around a lot. From what was it? Was it your father's work that sort of took you to many places?
Yes, and he was a doctor in the British military, and so we, after being born in Britain, we went to Africa, Nigeria to be specific, and then back to Britain, and then he got this posting to the British Embassy in Washington. And that was just as Kennedy was being inaugurated, which shows you how ancient I am. And that was a really difficult time in terms of being a preteen in suburban USA. I really didn't know where I fit in. And to be honest, I think my gift of mimicry was honed with all those trips to different countries. And certainly the time we spent in suburban DC in Bethesda, Maryland, I remember becoming very keen on doing different characters. And it was, but I was a very, I would say, not well-adjusted preteen, going from a British girls' boarding school to a suburban high school where kids had swimming pool parties,
Right.
and it was a fairly wealthy enclave, 70% Jewish. I had never even met a Jew in England, and most of my friends were Jewish. They took me under their wing. They took me to Saturday school. They very much included me. And I think really after that, because then we emigrated to Canada, I wanted to be in that milieu again. And so going to McGill seemed like because it's like a more culturally diverse in terms of interesting people, because North Toronto was very waspy, and so going to Montreal felt like a comfortable, exciting, adventurous move, and it was all that.
Yeah. Well, McGill's the culture at McGill and everything about McGill. Both my daughters went there, and although when they were first thinking of schools, they looked at others until like the moment they were on the campus at McGill, they said, "This is where we have to be." It's such a rich campus and such a student-driven university. So
and the year I got there was the crisis, the October, was it the October crisis?
Yeah.
69, right?
Yes,
so
that's right.
So there were troops in the streets, and it was an exciting time to go. And in terms of theater people, if you were doing any theater, there were theater people who just disappeared because they were taken in for questioning. So it was a thrilling and scary time to be in Montreal as well.
Yeah. No, I was there at the same time, and I say shamelessly that when I woke up the morning that the news was that I was at Sir George, because I could get a theater degree there, and there was news that the computer center had been overtaken, that there were computers being thrown out of windows, and I went to the drama department thinking, well, we're just going to continue rehearsing. I mean, this isn't going to get in our way. I said to myself until I got to the entrance, and it became very clear very fast that nobody was going in. And so I guess my radicalization hadn't yet begun. But okay, so you were at McGill, and you mentioned that became perhaps pivotal or changed something. So what was it at McGill that gave you either a sense of or a greater belief that this is work that you should be doing?
When you were applying for classes, you had to go and try and meet with various professors, and courses filled up very quickly. And I met a gal in residence who, again, I bring up the Jewish thing. She came from the Jewish side of the tracks. I was from the WASP side of the track. So she had gone to Forest Hill Collegiate. I'd gone to Lawrence Park. And we both wanted to take drama. And so we were both somewhat pushy and made our ways into interviews that probably we wouldn't have gotten without the camaraderie that we had between each other. She didn't remain a friend, but she was critical on that first year. And needless to say, I didn't last very long at Royal Victoria College because there was a curfew, and I was not into being a good girl in those days. So I moved out of residence within 2 months, but it was enough to get me into drama courses and doing theater. And in fact, Erica Ritter, who I happened to see a few weeks ago, the playwright, who wrote Automatic Pilot, as you probably well know.
And you were the original central character in the play.
She said that she saw me on the stage of that big old grand theater in the main building there, and she said she wrote a review that said that I was up and coming, which I find quite surprising because I really didn't know what I was doing. A little learning is a dangerous thing, and I thought I was doing. I think we were I think it was Ubu Roi we were doing by Alfred Jerry. I mean, could you get more obscure than that? But anyway, so that's how it all started. Okay. And I thought I knew what I was doing, but I really didn't.
Okay. And then, I'm not meaning to have this sort of step by step, the next chapter of your life, but it's fascinating because at McGill, I mean, you could probably be as could have been as involved as you wanted to be, taking on as many projects as you wished. But when you have that, and then you're finished with school and you're out, how do you move from that world into the profession? And is it easy?
I auditioned for the National Theatre School while I was at McGill and didn't get in because, again, I thought I knew. I must have, I think I was presenting as a very achieved actress, which doesn't mean a very good one. So when I left university, I didn't think I'd had complete enough of training. And so I had gotten into a small British drama school. I won't name it because I'm so embarrassed because I just never showed up. And I didn't write and say, I'm not coming. And
but you did but you were accepted.
I was.
Yes.
But I started getting work and I decided that I'm just going to keep taking classes. So I've always been the kind of actor who took classes. I mean, we must remember the historical context of the 70s, the early 70s. We were a very privileged, very white generation.
Yep.
And we had lip grants thrown at us and all kinds of things were possible. And so when I look at the younger generation today, I have nothing but admiration because, they have to do about 5 things and twirl a few plates and rent is still unaffordable. So it was a really easy time to move ahead. One of my professors at McGill stated after I left to somebody else, I think, that I was the most ambitious person to go through the program that he had. And I think I was incredibly determined and ambitious. And again, I think it stemmed from more of a desire to show and have attention than to actually become someone else. And I had a professor, Lynn Oxenford, who was a visiting professor from the Guildhall School in England. And she set a challenge to me, which was, you're basically playing yourself. She said, when you play Ophelia, you are somewhat mad, and that's what you're playing, which I said a backhanded compliment if ever there was one. And so she said, you need to actually understand what it is to become another character and take that from the page. So I took that as my challenge and wanted very much to remove idiosyncrasy from my work. And then, of course, when it was far too late, realized that all the really hugely successful people don't remove idiosyncrasy at all. That to be, especially a successful film star, it's all about discovering who you are and what you are. And I just set myself a different challenge, which was this art, because it is an art of becoming something or someone else, and thought, well, that's the thing. And so became actually quite snobby about that as a goal, and then realized that the pots of money were being made by anyone I knew who, sorry about that siren, about the people I knew who perfected the art of being themselves, especially on camera, and did rather well at it.
Do you have any recollection of when that realization hit you?
I think it was around my Second City days. I had a sort of two warring careers in that I had legitimate theater offers, and then I had Second City, and my friends were in Second City, and Jane Eastwood and I were roommates, and she said it was just giving her, making her crazy because it was that those nightly improvs were really pressured, and Gilda was in Gilda Radner and Dan Aykroyd and Valerie Bromfield, and they were all in that iteration of. It was very early days, Second City, and I was in it briefly, and I sort of looked down at the idea of you have 4 characters and you hone those characters for laughs, and I remember Gilda used to say, I've got 4 good jokes and I want to do this because I've got good jokes. And I remember thinking, imagine doing something just because you have good jokes. Well, it did rather well for her. So I think my snobbery was perverse. I also think it helped I think it helped improve me as an actor, but certainly by then I wanted to go into legitimate theater
Yeah.
And not sort of the Second City type thing.
Sure.
I was also doing TV at the time, a children's sitcom, and Dan Aykroyd was in that. But I had very fervent aspirations towards legitimate theater, and then I think The King of Kensington came along. So I really didn't appreciate that success as I could have, and realized what an opportunity it was. I sort of thought, oh gosh, when do I get back to legitimate theater? And so I quit after 3 years, and really could have had all kinds of things on a platter that I would really yearn for now.
Yeah.
But that's just the way, those are the decisions you make when you're young.
Sure. And I was going to ask when, in the sequence where King of Kensington fit in, but now we know. And so
Yeah.
with your desire and your drive to be working in, for lack of a better word, sort of in legit theater, how did that happen, and where did you first feel that you were able to be where your soul was telling you wanted to be?
I guess the first time was in the off season of, so King of Kensington started in 74. I graduated in 72. And in the off season from King, I went to MTC. I'm not sure how. Oh, that came about that was a carryover from just after I graduated, I guess. And because yes, I had done MTC. I had done MTC in my first few months after university, I guess. So then that was the first time I got to work with Richard Cottrell, a British director who at that time was, I think, running the Bristol Vic at that time. And it was just a joyful experience working with him on a restoration comedy, and then A Flea in Her Ear the following year. And then after that, I just really wanted to get to Stratford or Shaw. And then in about 70 something, did I do Stratford first or Shaw first? I did Stratford first. And so that felt, oh gosh, I'm here. That's great. And then I did Shaw, which was a lot more fun, I have to say, because one was permitted to take more risk. And I could have kept working at Shaw a lot more than I did, but I was always worried about working there too much, that it would make me a certain kind of actor. So I kept trying to mix it up, and I had some nice film and TV stuff in that time too. So tried to sort of mix it all up, but it's really hard to run a career and have stuff work out, and then having kids as well, which started in the mid 80s.
Yeah.
2 kids,
and that's where I'm heading next. It's just with that, and knowing that you and Mac have a family, you've got children, and the busyness of your life, like, how does that work, and how does it fit, and how did it challenge you with certainly professional aspirations and the drive you had? How was that when you became a mother?
I always worried a lot about money, and I think I bought into propaganda, really, that gosh, you can do it all and you can have it all. And I wish I'd been a little more calm about all of it, because Mac was trying to run his own business, so his hours were long. But the fact is, you do it. Your children miss you. You lie to yourself about how much they miss you. And I don't think they really ever get over having missed you, and to be honest. So, of course, I have some regret, but I remember choosing to not do a wonderful Shaw play because it was Alec's first year. And these decisions are so hit and miss, and then when you've got 2, it just doubles the guilt. I don't think it was ever easy. And I think the only good thing to be said is that the enduring example of a working mother is a good one.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the emotional succor that your children don't get when you're working, I'm sure it's the same for men as well.
Sure.
It's really, really hard. And Mac would come out if I was out of town, because regional theaters were more they took more artists from Toronto than they do now.
Mm-hmm.
I would Mac would always come out with the kids, and those times were fun because sometimes you could go to Jasper or Banff if you were in Edmonton. I remember taking small sleeping children in the car late on a Sunday night after the show. But as I say, I don't look upon that as an easy time. And I remember my friend Nancy Pock saying, you live for years with the babysitting blues, which is, if you can't get a babysitter and you need to make this work or that work, it can be quite it can be emotionally exhausting.
Oh, sure, of course, because it's emotionally exhausting without that. And then the added, whether it's questioning yourself or doing all of those things, absolutely adds to the anxiety and the energy that it takes.
Well, I think that theater has generally been a very unfriendly place in terms of childcare. Mm-hmm. So when I was at Shaw, I would have to just go, okay, there's that chunk of that salary that has to go to childcare for someone to stay or not stay, but be available whenever I need them, because the hours are crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Now that improved after I left, and certain actors, women, militated to have a better system. But there's a wonderful story in which Jane Lapater in England, and this must have been in the 70s, because I don't think a male director would dare say that these days, but she got a call from her child's school that there'd been an accident in the schoolyard and that involved her child, and she said to the director, I have to go, my child's been involved in an accident. And the director said, well, no, you have to rehearse. And she said, no, I have to go. And he said, well, I guess you're going to have to decide whether you're a mother or you're an actor. And she looked at him and she said, well, I guess I'm both. And I've always thought, some directors recognize that better than others. I think now, if a child is ill, I think we do realize that everything maybe has to stop. I mean, there's this incredible thing that we have, which is that we don't stop for anything. And I still have it. And it's utterly generational, because I will say that nowadays, I won't sort of get too personal, but I mean, in doing certain large productions, I guess you can easily guess which, the old actors are hauling their asses to do yet another show. And it was certainly generational that the old ones always showed up no matter what.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we'll get to that big show. I'm sure. I need you to set me right, whether my perception is as wonky as I think public perception often is about a performer whose name is very often present and front of mind, with the assumption that Fiona Reid is never without work. And
oh my gosh,
working, it just never stops. And I know from speaking to quite a number of people, some of whom are guests on this podcast, many more. I mean, I think I've never met anybody who has been in that position where they say, oh, I long for the day that I can actually not be getting offers. So what is that, help me to understand for Fiona, how legitimate a perception that is.
Well, here I am now, very fortunate to have work coming up, three theater jobs. And I feel inordinately lucky. I also know in the back of my head those are fairly modest salaries, and so there's that kind of accounting, because you do want to do it all. You go, well, if I were in New York doing a show on Broadway, I could get in at Law and Order during the day, and I mean that's you're permitted that in the States in a way that casting agents here just don't permit you. It's your agent has to tell them, and they don't even want you to go up for the job. So I bemoan that. I always want what I don't have, and always have. And in fact, I was just talking to a fellow actor this morning who said, you've always taken it to way too much to heart if you don't get something, and I have, and it's ridiculous. And the other day I heard someone who had 2 days shooting on something, and I thought, oh gosh, I'd love to just have 2 days to just do some TV. And then I was swimming, which is where I have all my profound thoughts. And I thought, where is your gratitude? Because I would bemoan not working and then realize there are people who envy you for whatever you've got or have had. So stop it. Just stop it. It's bad manners. It's bad form. So I do remonstrate with myself and say, stop wanting to have it all, because I feel sorry for myself way too often. And as I say, wanting what you don't have, it's a terrible quality. And you'd think at the ripe old age of 73 that I would have eradicated it from my makeup, but I'm still working on it. It's I've had long periods of not working where I've entertained thoughts of, what do I do now? I mean, this is where I admire young people so much now, because rents in Toronto mean you can't just wait for a theater job that won't give you your rent anyway. And they are so gifted in terms of writing skills and whatever, photography or design or just and I know the training has changed so that now you're trained to do more, so that you're not just relying on being an actor. I mean, I'm a one-note pony or one-note piano or one-note something, and that's me. I'm just not versatile that way, and I have profound admiration. But no, the not working is, you can be really well known and not work for a year or more, and I think it's why, in relative terms, even if you are just an actor, we are versatile in terms of voice work and TV and theater. And I've always believed that theater makes you a better film actor, but I have found it. COVID did it for me. The old self-tapes during COVID, when suddenly they could ask anybody and everybody to audition. And I just found that really trying, because so often you wouldn't hear anything. And that world has changed. You used to always get some kind of feedback, and now it's just, you have to know that you put it out there into the ether. You probably will hear nothing. And there has to be something enjoyable in it. Otherwise, you're punishing yourself.
Yeah. I mean, the self-taping thing, which certainly did start and has seems to be permanently part of the business now, is such a mean thing, because I know so many people who quickly were trying to figure out how to do that in a room, in a hallway, to have the equipment they needed. Now, it's true it didn't need to be the highest end equipment, but even so, I know that my daughter and son-in-law, who are both actors, have two daughters who at the time I guess were 8 and 10, and they became really skilled at lighting and the sound, and they loved it. It was a kind of game, and because it was the pandemic, it was a real focus. But I said, how many people have this opportunity? And that hasn't stopped, right? I mean, it's still the world of self-tape with no compensation for any of the performers.
No, it should be compensated.
Yeah.
And then they would think twice about what they're asking you to do, because you're lighting yourself. There are days when I go, until I have a blue background, I'm never going to get a part. My olive green background is just because whenever I see a blue background, I go, oh gosh, that looks so much better. And all kinds of factors, lighting especially. I mean, we all started with what I call the glitter ring. And then I realized, oh, you can see the glitter ring in your eyes, or you can certainly see it if you're wearing glasses. And so now I realize, oh, I've got to do side lighting, and lighting is everything. And so part of me just goes, oh, I'm just too tired. I mean, it's just, I also think because when you compare, we have some very close friends who are big stars in Quebec, and when you compare the scene there, they can say, I'm sorry, I don't audition. Everybody knows their work. Something profound happened between 1975 and 2005 or 2015, maybe. We became a service industry like Vancouver was and is, whereas we used to be more homegrown and have more Canadian production. And now to be like, nobody knows my work. I'm just, what's my hit? And I can't bear the fact that I have had to become focused on, well, the very thing that I tried to become an actor to not be, which is I can do anything with this head and this body. My instrument is such that I can be the dowdy plain person. I can be the glamour. I can be the upper class, whatever. So I wanted to do all that. Well, now it's, what is my hit? What's my hit? And so I find that limiting. I don't have good enough knowledge of myself to know how to market myself. And I think the younger generation is far more sophisticated at that, and I admire it so much more. I mean, they've grown up with filming technology in their fingertips, and it's just not a big deal for them.
Yeah. I'm curious because I know you've worked in large theaters, in festival theaters on Broadway, and we will get to that. And you've also worked, and I'm curious to know the three projects you have that you were referring to, if you want to talk about them or mention them. Yeah. But those will be in smaller, independent type theaters. Yeah. And how is it very different being in a small theater? So like Tarragon, Crow's Theatre, Coal Mine, Berkeley Street, as opposed to being on the festival stage somewhere, or in an A or an A+ house?
Well, you learn not to ask for things in an indie theater. You know that, I don't want to get specific about theaters, but you know that whoever's working to be there is probably doing way too many things, and you have to be very, very careful about asking for anything. So when you were in a festival setup, you would know the shoes arrive on a certain day, and whereas lately it was like, what, I've got a great pair of shoes, we don't have to look for shoes. It's that kind of thing. And so it's a different kind of appreciation for what goes into everything. And certainly as an older white woman, I have really, I might have been perceived, I don't know, like it's, maybe you were even encouraged at a certain point in a certain way to be, you could ask for things. I try not to do that anywhere now. I think I have come to an appreciation of first of all, I've always appreciated the artistry that goes into any aspect of production. So I've always been oh my gosh, you cut this so beautifully, and how did you get this line, and how did you do this? And so I've always been admiring of that, loving all the crafts that go into it. And I've always been really curious about all that. But I think there's an element where if you've been around for a long time, maybe somebody expects you to maybe be a little grand. And so I go so far in the other direction that I self-deprecate up the yin yang, and I probably go too far the other way.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, part of that's just the growing up process too. You just learn to. I don't think I was really that kind or nice when I started out. I was very sort of intense, and this is what we do, and this is how we do it, and this is what, to be good you have to be like. And then I just thought, oh, give it a rest, stop it. I think I took myself way too seriously, and I don't think that has anything to do with the question you asked, but maybe I needed to get that off my chest. But certainly working in an indie theater, there's the appreciation of human value that I think is a terrific thing. So I'm grateful for it. I have come to a newfound appreciation of how lucky I am to be in the room. And I don't venture opinions like I used to.
Mm-hmm.
I listen better. And I think that's been a good thing.
Good. Okay. I've spent a lot of time in small independent theater, so much of what you're saying rings very loudly. I mean, you're doing your best when you're producing something. You're doing your best to give everybody, particularly the performers, everything you feel they need and they should have. And I think going in knowing that some of that is not going to happen, or it's not going to happen the way you had hoped it might. So, and some of that is, certainly from my perspective, some of it has to do with, the material you choose to do. So I've never chosen, I've never been attracted when I know the scale at which I'm going to be working to do something that is a period piece, that is going to require or demand elements that you simply can't find or shop or, and we did that. I remember doing that once. And so we had a wonderful support from the Shaw Festival and said, you can have all these things. And then you have all those things and you realize by looking at them, you have all those things, but you can't complete them because you don't have every accoutrement.
Well, I went to see the first preview of Rosmersholm last night at Crow's, which is just up the road where I am. And the costumes were beautiful. And I looked at the backs of them and I thought, okay. And all I could do is think through, I don't think that's just borrowed, or if it is, it's been altered beautifully. And then I was looking at the wigs and I was going, well, you've got to have someone there to maintain those wigs. Now at Soul Pepper, we used to have someone once a week, and that was an adjustment from what you'd know at Shaw at Stratford. But it's all that kind of stuff in the back of my head. How are they doing that? Yeah. And I marvel at it because it's way more fun to see something that is done on less money with more imagination than it is, from comparing them to the big budget places. Yeah. I mean, I think I've come to love. I think indie theater in many ways is the most exciting theater in Toronto. So I have great respect for those who have been doing indie theater for longer than I have.
Yeah. Along this trajectory of yours, which is long and complex because it's never a straight line. I'm curious, are there particular people who were pivotal, who, whether they were aware of it or not, inspired you in ways that you might not even have known at the time? I mean, I don't know how much of this is reflective, how much of it is active, because I take your point that when particularly sort of early in a career, and I'm projecting here, but you're too preoccupied with yourself and looking ahead and saying, like, what's next? I'm doing this show now, but what's going to happen after this show seems to push other things away. I mean, there isn't room for anybody but me. But are there people who have managed to change the way you've seen things or directed you somewhere that really was permanent?
I think Richard Cottrell, the aforementioned Richard Cottrell, taught me so much about the generosity required, especially in comedy. Robin Phillips taught me so much, and I didn't really work with him as much as, say, someone like Nancy Polk did, but he taught me a lot about how we're changing the air in the room, and about how that we think we're receiving, but we're not really receiving, and how to both Richard Cottrell and Robin taught me a great deal about respecting text, and everything for me became taking it from the text, which went out of vogue. I think it's coming a little back in vogue now. But because sometimes you can feel pretty arcane to be talking a lot about text. Respecting punctuation in text, respecting the actual words written, like actually saying what's written and not thinking your words are better. And Christopher Newton, I would think, would be another person. Now that's very white male centric, but I'm sure there are other people, but those are the ones that spring to mind.
Sure. And we talked. We've made reference a couple of times to you're working on Broadway. So I know that you were in Harry Potter and the Cursed Child. How did that happen for you?
Well, I heard that the auditions were going to happen, and I wanted to be in it very, very much. And so I did the audition, and then heard nothing, and then got a call back, and then heard nothing. And then I was in a production of The Children that went from Toronto to Montreal. And it all got very convoluted because they took their time about making an offer. And for the longest time, I just felt like I was being dangled on a rope, because they were talking about San Francisco, which was a long way to go. And I was entertaining another offer at Stratford, and not offer. It was interest. It was not an offer, because there was a point where I went, oh no, I'm going to do the Stratford thing. And then the Stratford thing went away, and and then it turned out to be Broadway and not San Francisco. And I've just always wanted to play on Broadway. And I have to say, so I went down to New York for this very exciting, nail-biting audition. And I had this wonderful actor friend who I did one of my earliest jobs in Toronto with, Joe Grafazzi, who does a lot of film and TV. And I did a show with them, Yale, a bunch of guys from Yale, early on in my career, and he's remained a friend. And he was so great. When I went for the call back, I hadn't slept a wink in this hotel. Construction started at about 5 a.m. It was really awful. And I turn up at this rehearsal studio where I think on 42nd or something, where I'm having the audition. And he said, Fee, let's just rent another studio for $25 for the hour. And he chilled me out for this hour before the callback, which was with all the big honchos. And I will be eternally grateful to him, because I think I only got the job because he allowed me to have fun once I got into the callback. And you had to do this 45-minute movement thing, which was all about, are you a good team player physically? Can you act and not kill other people when you're on stage? Because you're being sensitive physically is a huge part of a show like that for safety.
Yep.
But honestly, it was the most exciting gig, because I never forgot that I was on Broadway. I never forgot that I was in New York City, and I absolutely loved it. And it's terrible to say, because it sounds kind of cheesy, but it was just so exciting.
Well, that's okay. No, I mean, that you're saying it's a dream, right? You always wanted to play on Broadway, and you got to play on Broadway. And having done, how long were you in the show there?
That was 15 months or something, but I could have done 3 more months, and then darn COVID, and then the Toronto production. I always knew I was going to do Toronto, but I was going to do 3 more months of New York, and then Toronto. And so then Toronto, and that was lovely and fun, and it's hard. I mean, a show like that is hard on the body. The schedule is pretty hard on the body and the spirit. But you end up again with a huge appreciation of people. Who sucks the energy out of the room? Who brings energy to the table? Mm-hmm. Who are you happy to see every day? And just so grateful for I guess I've come to realize in my very long life that playing well with others, which is not a quality I always had, I don't think, it's just the most important thing. Be the person that someone wants to come and see at work. Mm-hmm. Because we would come into work, we'd leave at 11 at night and come in to be on the 5th floor. So that means climbing 5 flights of stairs for 11 in the morning. And sometimes you just wanted to, step into a coffin. You were so tired. But you just try to make other people laugh, or don't bug that person today, or it was sure. Boy, you really learn a lot about human nature.
Yeah. Yep. And having enjoyed doing the play both in New York and Toronto, was there when you were doing it in Toronto, you were home, so that would certainly be different, but did it feel, were there aspects of doing it in New York that made it unique? Or was it simply that it was New York and it was Broadway?
It would be like Billie Eilish is here tonight. We're going to take a picture with Billie Eilish, and you go, whoa. And of course, me being, I knew who Billie Eilish was, but there was Zendaya, Zendaya. There were times when I'd go, let me Google that person. Who is that? Anyway, those two I knew, I have to say, just so you don't think I'm completely out of it. But the celebrity of New York. Mm-hmm. And then going out with a castmate to some bar that you have to be on Broadway to get into this bar, like that kind of, feeling special for 2 minutes, And I was playing a track that only the true aficionados would know I'd even been in the show half the time, because you play 3 different people and you're just busy backstage doing quick changes all the time. But the thrill of it. I mean, I worked with Steven Spinella, 2-time Tony Award winner from Angels of America. Yeah. He took me to his place and showed me how to bake bread. I mean, it's that kind of, I guess I'm as awestruck as the next person. Mm-hmm. And that I just was there, and I got to breathe the same air, and it was it just felt very cool.
That's wonderful. I mean, it's exciting. Just your excitement has made its way, through the podcast air. No, it's great. That is great. And just as we're finishing up this conversation, this is a real cliche, but all the same, here it is. You've mentioned several times your admiration for current young artists and the ways in which they work. Do you have, if somebody were to ask you for advice or suggestion or something to think about at the very early stages of a career, I don't know how that would be received by somebody who is busily trying to plan or figure out their career, or something that you would like to have heard when you were feeling that you were told that you were the most ambitious person in the class, whether or not.
I think.
Yep.
Sorry, well, sorry if I'm interrupting you, but no. I think that the generosity. I think, to be honest, I think there were people who tried to tell me when I was mortified. Will I get an offer from Stratford, and being told. It's not the end of the world. Well, for me, it was the end of the world. So it's taken me a lifetime to have an appreciation of the resilience required. Mm-hmm. And I simply don't think I could do it today. I don't think I would, because I'm just not resilient enough. But I would say taking comfort in the support of other people. Find a support group, find a way to support each other, because it can be a very lonely profession. And we go into it because we want to collaborate. Mm-hmm. So, I worked myself into a fine state of angst a few months ago about my self-tape auditions. And a friend recommended, well, come and do this group. We just work with a camera. We pay $20 to work in front of a camera. And Salvatore Antonio was the coach. And it just find your chums and find your pals, and don't ever stop being generous, because it can get very me focused with the way our iPhones work, with the way social media works. And finally, it's a collaborative art form, and the joy of it is hearing others and hearing what they have to say.
That's a wonderful way to bring this conversation to an end, or to bring this part of the conversation. Thank you so much, Fiona, and thanks for how direct you are and how clear you are about your own way through a really precarious world. And thank you to all of our listeners and supporters. And for those of you who would like to help support the running cost of Life in Stages, you can go to patreon.com, patreon.com/Life in Stages. The directions are there. You can follow us, and you can tell all your friends that they can find Life in Stages wherever they find their podcasts. Thanks again, Fiona, and until next time. Bye-bye.